life. You only get one shot to get out there and make a difference. And when you carry those body bags, it's so heavy. It's so heavy physically and emotionally. Like those people gave up everything. You have an obligation now to get out there and make that difference so that their sacrifice mattered, you know? Um, what you do every single day. I mean, that's what when I wake up in the mornings, that's what I think about. That's what motivates me. And you only have one life, so you cannot be afraid to fail. All right. You know, there's so many people that have died, for this country. Like, what are you afraid of? You're afraid of failing? You're afraid of being made fun of? You write a book, nobody likes it, nobody cares. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm living, I'm breathing, I'm blessed with 3 children and an amazing wife. Like failure will make you better. That fear of failure will motivate you, and failure makes you sharper. So if you're not pushing yourself towards failure, you haven't pushed yourself far enough.
Dr. Josh McConkey is a U.S. Air Force Reserve Colonel, a physician, and a passionate advocate for leadership and community involvement. He talks about his leadership approach in his book, Be the Weight of the Spear. In 2007, Josh deployed to Iraq to provide medevac support as a flight surgeon. But his greatest test didn't come during the war, it came when he returned home. And does he have a wild tale to tell about how he turned down a $3.4 million payout on ethical grounds? And what happened next will astound you. Josh, welcome to Bump in the Road. If you would, tell us your story.
Thank you very much for having me on the show. So I grew up in a very small town in rural western Nebraska. It was a whole family lineage of railroaders. My dad, my grandfather, and my great grandfather were all railroaders. So I broke the mold. I went to college. I was the first McConkey to go to college. I went to a small school in rural western Nebraska and found out very early that I love I'm a math and science nerd, science, biology, and got into medical school and was very lucky. It was a rural health opportunities program out of western Nebraska there. So got into medical school relatively early and did 3 years of undergrad, finished that degree probably too quickly. I should have taken some more time to relax a little bit and went to University of Nebraska in Omaha for medical school. Joined the military after that. Got to do some pretty amazing things. Served in Iraq in 2007 and I was Army Guard previously. I'm now a commander in the Air Force Reserves and had was very fortunate to own a business in 2017 and 18. We moved down to Georgetown, Texas, and started a business, which is where all of this begins.
Tell us the story because it is an incredible story.
It is a very difficult story. It's quite painful for me, but it's been several years now, so we can, you move on, you learn from your mistakes, you take responsibility for those things, and unfortunately, the world just has some very evil people in there, and you can't control other people. You can only control yourself. So the story starts in Georgetown, Texas. I was a part owner of a business, a freestanding emergency department there in Georgetown, and I've practiced emergency medicine for 20 years. I was very excited for this opportunity. Was working with joint ownership with two of my residency classmates, and then there were three other individuals that I should have done much more of a due diligence on, but did not. So the majority shareholder owned essentially 55% of the company, somewhere around there. We owned like 45% of that, roughly around there. And with majority shareholder um, ownership, I learned very quickly that the majority shareholder can pretty much do anything that they want. So after about a year in the business, we were making great money. We were very involved in the community, lots of events. I was really having fun being able to practice medicine without the constraints of a big hospital system. I could really spend as much time as I wanted with patients and in great, like world-class care, making great money. And then you find out that the CEO, the majority shareholder, is embezzling money. They are writing off So there was a lawsuit at another business that he owned that had sexual harassment allegations that he wrote off $90,000 of those legal bills through our business. We had nothing to do with
Oh my
that.
god.
And we ended up hiring a forensic accountant. So there was about $126,000, $130,000 that they overcharged us for payroll. There was $90,000 in these like legal bills that we had nothing to do with. And then towards the end, he just straight up stole $650,000 out of the bank account, claimed that we owed him back management expenses. Um, we ended up having to file a lawsuit to prevent him from bankrupting the company. So this is how it played out. I had applied for a national security conference council position in Washington, D.C. I am dual board certified. I'm fellowship board certified in disaster medicine, EMS, with FEMA disasters, that type of stuff. So they had a reserved position on the National Security Council. I put an
Mm,
application in, and it's obviously a top secret clearance. And there are a lot of questions that get asked, and they get into your personal finances and business. And I realized very quickly, like, whoa, 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 this is actually a really big deal. This is more than just this guy being involved in some very shady activity. There was some Medicare and Medicaid, Medicare law violations, some self referral of patients to other businesses that he owned. It was a Stark law violation. So all kinds of things that I realized I could not be a part of this. So I approached him and I told him, "Hey, listen, I've applied for a National Security Council position. It's a top secret clearance. I know what's going on here. I cannot be part of this. You have to stop." So he's a raging narcissist. So first he offered me a bribe initially. So he offered me a $3.4 million bribe, and I told him to shove it up his rear end.
mhm.
I'm a colonel in the United States Air Force. I will not compromise my integrity for a single penny, not one. And knowing now that he's been involved in multiple lawsuits and multiple businesses, and he always writes everything off. So has him sign a non-disclosure agreement, throws like money at him, and then everyone gives up. Now he found probably the one dude in the country that would turn down $3.4 million.
That
Um,
had to be hard to do.
well, I had to talk with my wife, and it was a relatively easy decision in that I value my military career very highly. That security clearance is a big deal. And there was really he could offer me $1 billion. It would not have mattered. I am not going to compromise, a security clearance in my military service, 23 years of decorated service. I'm not, that means a lot to me. That's more than any amount of money. So, I mean, it was a hard decision financially because that's a ton of money, but really just who I am as a person. There was no way I wasn't going to accept any money at all. So he got very, very angry. And then he tried to bankrupt the business just to destroy me. So he stopped paying bills, even the electrical bill. There was all kinds of things that started happening. We filed a lawsuit in the federal courts, the local district court there, to prevent him from bankrupting the company. So this is 2019, 2020, and then we all know what happened, right?
Yeah.
COVID hits. So froze the courts. We couldn't get a court date. He just destroyed us. He controlled the bank account, so he refused to pay us. So he just starved us out. So all the distributions, all the money that we were making, um, I mean, it was close to it was crazy money. I think I made $800,000 like that first year, and it was just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And he just starved us out. So he just refused to make distributions. He wasn't paying the bills. I had to start paying bills from my own personal funds for some of the vendors, some of the radiology service, and even paying one of the electrical bills, which was crazy.
What happened to all the money that was just sitting in the corporation? Did he just suck that out?
Well, that's it. So he just took out the $650,000, saying that we owed him for back management
Mhm.
expenses. So he just straight up stole that. The judge made him put that back. And it just was going back and forth with the craziness of just civil litigation. I had never experienced that before. The games he was playing, he had obviously been through many, many lawsuits. I know now. I wish I would have known that before. But he was very skilled and very good at just delaying things and causing as much pain as possible. And I personally spent $250,000 in legal fees. And at the end of the day, he just basically, uh, I was near bankruptcy. I ran out of money. My attorney just bailed. He's like, "Oh, you're out of money. It's over. I'm out." I I can never imagine doing that as a physician. I just kinda have a code of ethics. I could never just bail on a patient if they weren't gonna pay for treatment. That's just not how my mind would ever work, but that's apparently how it works in the legal system. Once you run out of money, your attorney bails on you, and, I lost $5,000,000. So, as things got really bad, after I turned down the bribe, in addition to all the you're trying to bankrupt us and refusing to pay, he actually started with threats. So he actually threatened my family. He sent this goon over and just made some comments like, "Hey, Josh, you better be careful. He knows some real scary people." I'm like, what does that mean?" So I
Who
had to
talks
conceal.
like that?
I had a life.
Where?
Yeah, yeah, bizarre. So I mean, I had a license to carry a concealed permit in Texas. So he was carrying a weapon. He played all kinds of games, and at the end, I am a military guy. I do have some training and some skills, and I don't take that very lightly. So I had a discussion with my wife. One or two things were going to happen. It's going to get very bad for him, and so we removed ourselves from the situation. We moved to Australia. I'm board certified in Australasia, so that was always kind of a doomsday scenario backup plan. I kept that board certification and the license. Never imagined I would have had to use it, but in that situation where things got so bad, and then he actually threatened my family, I have a very low tolerance for threats against my family. So we moved overseas. I worked at Flinders University for a year, and then the COVID thing was crazy enough in Australia. It was bad everywhere around the world, but we ended up moving back to North Carolina where we live now, and this is home for the kids. So much happier now. Um, very very painful lessons for me to learn.
What are some of the lessons that came out of it?
You know, the world just unfortunately has some bad people in there, and they have ill intentions. And when you read the contract, the way it was written, the very fine print, or the like 19, 20 pages of the contract, there's certain sections there that didn't really make a whole lot of sense and you maybe overlook. I even hired an attorney to look at it. And then knowing now how he used that to just screw everybody over and steal money and do crazy things, well, that's why it was written like that. So, you can't control what other people do. You can only control what you do. And that's a very painful lesson. I can control how I respond to situations. And I wasn't gonna dive down to that level. I wasn't gonna take that bribe. That's a lot of money, man. $3.4 million. My grandfather, my great grandfather, my dad are railroaders, blue collar. Never in their wildest dreams could they have even thought about that much money. So, unfortunately, it's just a lot of money lost there. But, when you start to look at questions that had been asked previously with some shady answers that maybe you look past because you're so excited for this opportunity, I would have paid a lot more attention to that. And then the misgivings that my wife had, some of the personal character issues, and one of my residency classmates that she just was never a real fan of, um, I dismissed as well and should not have. So, lesson number one is there's just bad people out there. Just control what you do. Lesson number two is listen to your wife.
What happened to the other partners in the company?
So he had so there the three of us that had that minority ownership share. He doing the same thing to all of them. So just punished. They all had, wife and kids and were not in a situation where they could easily go to another job or move out of the country. So they basically just folded. And at the end of the day, they just essentially, I mean, I could have fought that too, but again, I ran out of money for the court system. So they just stole my shares and just took $5 million.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's unfortunate.
it's brutal, but these things do happen. I ran into a situation in a business once where people were definitely acting with ill will from the beginning. I didn't pick up on it, and it cost me a great deal. One of the things that I take away from that set of circumstances is these people can only steal. I can create.
Mhm.
And as long as I can create, I will make something happen. I don't have to depend upon sucking somebody else's life force out of them, and nor would I want to. I
Yeah,
I I think that I think that having some personal standards of what you will or won't do, as you did, is really important.
yeah. Thank you. It's when you talk with most people that know me very well and some other business people, they're like, "Listen, if that's the way it was gonna go, like, it was gonna get much, much worse, and he will end up in jail
Yeah.
at some point. He's been sued in multiple businesses, multiple states, Arizona, I think there's one in Louisiana, Texas. I mean, he's been sued all over the place. He's just a nasty individual, and it will eventually catch up to him, and he will, because there was even IRS things as well, like, he had reported income under me that he clearly did not give me. It's gonna take a while, but he's eventually probably gonna be in jail, but it's just not gonna help me. And you just do the right thing. I've got 3 kids. I'm teaching them those lessons, and about integrity and being true to yourself. There's no amount of money, when you start to compromise your own personal values and your integrity, you're the one that looks yourself in the mirror, you know and 10 years from now, 20 years from now, or you're on your deathbed, does anybody care about like the 3 or $4 million or $5 million? No, it's about experiences and time with family. Like, my combat service is something I'm very, very proud of, and my military service. I'm not going to compromise that for a few million bucks. And you, what even made the story even crazier is then you dial the clock forward several years. So in February of 2024, I won the North Carolina educational lottery.
What is the educational
Yeah,
lottery?
yeah, the lottery. So I won the North Carolina lottery, and,
Wow.
just for me, I felt like it was a little divine intervention there. I felt like God was putting me through a big test. I wanted to see how I would respond. Like I said, you can only control what you do, and, a few years down the road, he's like, "Hey, listen, you passed the test. I know I made life hell for you for a few years. You had to bail to Australia, but here's a lottery win." So I got a big cartoon check, and you know, it's it's a crazy world, but karma eventually plays out in the end.
I think it does, and I think that if you can take a long enough time, horizon on any set of events, when you make what is the moral, the right, the correct choice, it will pan out for you one way or the other. It's if you take that other path, things are almost destined from that point on to fall apart, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's that the path that you set yourself on, you're going to reap the rewards, or you're going to pay the price for bad choices. For me, I just lost out financially, which you know
You
I'm
can
never
make
going to
more money.
starve. Yeah, you can always make more money, get a new job, start a new business, win the lottery, right? You can't get your integrity back once you've lost that. And those were just great lessons for myself. That my children saw that, and hopefully they learned a lot from that as well. In fact, like about a year or two after that, my son Luca won an integrity award at school, and we made a big deal of that in the household. And my parents called me up, say, "Hey, listen, you're doing the right thing. The kids are obviously learning from you, and keep up the great work." It was definitely a tough pill to swallow, losing that much money, but it's yeah, pretty wild.
You talk a lot about leadership in your book, and one of the things you talk about is being a zero. Talk
Yes.
about that because I thought that was terrific.
Yeah, that I love that. So, Colonel Chris Hadfield, a
Mhm.
Canadian astronaut, and was the first Canadian commander of the International Space Station. So, in his book, "An Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth," and it just a great book on just focusing on what's your goal, what are you trying to accomplish. Like, he literally narrowed everything he did in life when he was a kid, eating his broccoli, doing workouts. I mean, just everything was, will this help me be a better astronaut? The answer is yes, then that's what you're going for. And so he classified people with that aim to be a zero. I love this. So I talked about it in my book as well. But to understand what it means to be a zero, you have to understand, like, what's a plus one and minus one, right? So the plus ones, everybody knows the plus ones. These are the people that raise their hands a million times. They ask lots of stupid questions just to make everybody think they're super smart. I mean, they might be very bright individuals, but they just rub people the wrong way. They're very selfish. They're all about themselves. Like, nobody wants a plus one on the team. Okay. And then you've got your minus ones. Your minus ones don't pull their weight. They ride off everyone else's back. You're doing their work for them. They don't show up on time. They're just like an energy suck for the team. Nobody wants those people on their team either. So just be professional, be proficient, aim to be a zero. Okay. Just show up on time, do your job, be a good team member. People love to hang out with you. They want to be around you. You're an added member of that team. You probably are a plus one, but you don't have to tell anybody about it. Okay. They're going to know. So just aim to be a zero, be proficient and good at your job. I thought that was a fantastic description on just those. If you narrow people down to those three types, I think everyone knows what those three types are about.
How does that flow into the concept of leadership?
For me, as a military commander, so I've been in the military for 23 years. I've seen great leadership. I've seen very poor leadership. I've seen a
Mhm,
lot in between. But those leaders that don't have a big ego, that take the questions, in the military there's obviously a hierarchy, right?
mhm.
So there's a lot of formality, but I let them know, like, hey, listen, I'm part of this team. Call me out if you have questions. Like, pull it into private. If my first sergeant, if one of my senior enlisted leaders or my senior administrator have questions, I want to know. Question me why I'm making decisions. This is how we all learn. I'm certainly not perfect. Having that aim to be a zero mentality just is a good team member. Everyone loves to work with those people. You trust those people. They're not always out for themselves, and they're always trying to make the team better. So for me as a military commander, I think it has a huge impact on being a leader, and I've had a very successful, almost 3-year tenure now. So got a great team around me.
I think trust is a really important factor, and until you see that somebody has kind of earned their weight, can you trust them?
Yeah, you know, it's knowing what they've been through. You don't always have to know everything about someone's
Uh,
life, but that whole be the weight behind the spear mentality.
mhm.
That's my leadership ethos. And when you really break that down, I've been very fortunate. I've worked with special operators. I've worked in special forces. I was medical director for combat search and rescue, the PJs, the pararescue, who are just amazing heroes that do crazy, crazy things. It's very dangerous too. A lot of them have lost their life. There's a Chapman, was an airman that won the Medal of Honor, several years ago in Afghanistan. Was a PJ. And when you work with those types of individuals, I can't do those things. I just don't have that type of mental makeup. I don't jump out of airplanes and do crazy stuff like that. It's very dangerous. I save lives. I don't take lives. I'm a physician, but I can be the weight behind that tip of the spear. So when you realize that every single one of these heroes has a favorite coach, a favorite teacher, there's a mentor or a family member, someone in their life that gave them the amazing confidence to do what they do, that is being the weight behind the spear. And the more people just realize how important that role is and embrace that role and engage their communities, that is like the whole purpose of be the weight behind the spear. That's my ethos. And it served me very well in life on the civilian side and as a military leader. And, I've got my own weight behind my spear that's put me where I'm at right now.
Now, you may not have jumped out of planes, but you made some pretty interesting decisions about going on some pretty dangerous missions.
I did. That was a younger me, a very, adrenaline junkie me before children, but I did my time in Iraq. I flew medevac, and for people, medevac is the air ambulance, the helicopters that fly to the point of injury and pick up men and women that, have taken bullets or, shrapnel, have been injured for this country. I take tremendous pride in that. It was, exceptionally dangerous. There's always concerns for snipers and secondary IEDs and, boy, with 3 kids now, I could never do that type of stuff. I mean, I suppose I would if I absolutely had to, if this were World War III and, the fate of the country's on the line, I would do it, but man, I would think a lot more about it now because it was crazy dangerous. I did 1 air assault, dropping in, 45 Cav soldiers under night vision goggles about 2 or 3 AM in undisclosed locations in Iraq with just tracer fire and stuff going on around all around me. The craziest and the scariest thing I have ever done by a long shot.
Do you develop any sort of philosophy of life or death going through things like that?
I did. I got very in touch with my faith. I definitely would not have survived that without, my team. Joe Kelly was my colleague. He was a physician assistant, and Jim Higgins, our chaplain, was a very close friend. Now, boy, they really helped me through a lot. It's a complete change. So when you sit down and you're talking with one of your colleagues, before you fly a mission, and you have a very serious conversation and say, "Hey, Joe, man," because they had shot down 8 aircraft in a 2-week span. All right. They killed the flight surgeon just a couple of weeks before I got there, Colonel Allgood. And I sat down with Joe and I said, "Hey, Joe, if we get shot down today, sorry, I'll try not to get a little emotional here, but you know, like Joe, if we get shot down today, like, are you gonna are you gonna say the last bullet for yourself?" And he's like, "No, man, I got 3 girls at home. I gotta fight it out." And I mean, when you're having those types of very real discussions on things that could actually happen, that yeah, you're getting in touch with your faith, and you just you have to not fear death anymore. So it's not that I was suicidal. It's just if you're just constantly worrying about getting killed and what's going to happen, then there's no way you can do your job. So you literally just have to rewire your brain, and then once you just don't care about dying anymore, it's a hell of an adrenaline rush. The problem is when you come back home and you have to rewire yourself back to normal life. That's what gets you.
Was coming home difficult?
Yes, yes, it was very hard. I came home. I ended up getting a divorce from a previous marriage, and I went back to work within just, I mean, less than 2 weeks. So you're pulled off the battlefield. You're flying combat missions. Yeah, you go back to El Paso, Texas, and they ask you a couple of questions and say, "Hey, divorce rates 80% in returning service members. Good luck." You know, and I went home, got divorced, and I was in the emergency department about 2 weeks later, and it just very, very difficult. So trying to understand the mindset of just, you know, people that think that their life is so bad and their pain is 10 out of 10, and they literally have a hangnail or an ingrown toenail. And for me, 10 out of 10 pain is the guy just pulled off the battlefield with both legs missing and his couple of buddies died. And I mean, he's near death, and his only question is, "Hey, man, is my penis still there, and is my buddy alive?" Okay, that's all he cared about. Is it still there? Is my buddy okay? Like, man, that's real heroes. And then you come home and you're running a code. So there was a 2 or 3 week old baby that had some medical issues, came in cardiac arrest, was dying. And so we worked almost an hour on that baby, me and my nursing staff. Everyone was pretty destroyed. Baby did not survive. It's 2 or 3 in the morning. We're tired. We're crying. And we walk out of a room, and this mom just jumps out at me like, "Hey, get in here. We've been waiting for blah, blah." I'm like, "I'm sorry, ma'am. We just lost a baby, and we need a little bit of time." She's like, "I don't care. We were here first." And I think most people can understand that, but professionally, you still can't do this. So I her son was there for an ingrown toenail. He was 14 years old. He had an ingrown toenail. That was it.
And they went to the emergency room for
Well
this.
well, they went to the emergency room, and for her, that's 10 out of 10, and that should have superseded the dying baby. Okay, I can't make this stuff up. So, I got very upset. When she said, "I don't care, we were here first," I yelled some, expletives, and I told her to get out of my emergency department. And she said, "You can't do that." And I said, "Security, throw her out right now. Get her out of this emergency department." They threw her out. Administration was actually very supportive. I mean, they had known what I had gone through, and I think everyone's in agreement there that the ingrown toenail does not take precedence over a dying baby. I think probably 99.999% of planet Earth would feel that way. This particular mom did not, and so there's just unfortunately people like that out there. If you've been in healthcare very long, you've run across these people, but you still can't cuss them out and throw them out of your ER. So it was a hard transition for me. It took me really a couple of years, and I had met Elsa, my wife now, and she said, "You know what? Let's just get out of here." So we moved to New Zealand. I worked at a small emergency department in Rotorua, played soccer at Rotorua United, played goalkeeper, was the only American on the team, and I just had a complete decompression and got my mind into a much better place. And we ended up getting married down there. Our son Luca was born in New Zealand as well, and then we came back to the states. I had my head on straight, got back into the military, joined the Air Force Reserves, and I suppose the rest is history. But it's a really hard transition coming back from combat like that, just back to normal life. It's It's difficult. That's why you see a lot of PTSD and you see a lot of people struggle. And it's, going to combat and war, everyone wants to live, everyone wants to live, right? So you have to rewire your brain and you have to do what you have to do to get okay with what you're doing, you know. Um, Boy, it's kind of for people that haven't been through that, kind of hard to describe, but just basically it's live or die, and that's all you have to worry about. And then you come home and it's completely different, and you're just not the same person anymore. I didn't care about the money. I didn't want the big car. When I'm there in combat and you're flying those missions, I realized nobody cares what kind of car you drive. Like nobody cares. Nobody cares how big your house is. Nobody cares how much money you're making. It's like, dude, you're just gonna die here. Like nobody cares. And so you come back home, and that had a lot to do with my later decision in that business, and that I don't make decisions based on money, unless it's just like a pure financial decision. If my integrity or family or something else is involved, I'm going to put that ahead of the money issue. And that's how I live my life. And that probably had a big impact. Before I went to Iraq, I probably would have taken that bribe. I could take $3.4 million, chill out and retire, invest that right. I probably would have done that maybe before Iraq, but just after that experience, and you see men and women that lay down their lives and sacrifice everything for this country, that's the thing I'm the most proud of. I'm not going to compromise that at all.
What can we do for people coming back from tours overseas where they're in that warlike situation? What can we do to help ease transition back into a civilian life?
Getting that mental health support is really, really important. And I know so many service members in that moment just want to dismiss it all because they just want to get home and see their family. They've been gone for 6 months. I was gone for, I think, 4 months total. It was 3 months tour, and then, the 2 weeks on either side of that. Most people are there for 6 months or 12 months, or most of the people I was serving with, they were there for 15 months. So they have a 12-month tour, and then they get extended for 3 months. And then there were 6 months before that where they were training in Fort Hood. They want to get home. They want to see their family as quickly as possible. So they answer all those questions. They lie their ass off. They're just checking the boxes. Like, are you okay? Yep, yep, everything's good. Yep, you're good to go. I want to go home. Like, you're not, man. You're not. You're not okay. And so just for the service members to have that knowledge going in to really probably take more time for decompression, um, get into those mental health services at the VA and some other community services a lot earlier. And then just people around you, your family, the weight behind your spear, friends, coworkers, educating them, maybe not exactly what you saw or what you went through, but just how difficult of a process that is coming home, would probably help. Ron Sarno was the director there at Midlands Hospital in Omaha, and he was prior service. I think he went through the academy. He served in the Air Force. I don't think he saw any combat, but I mean, he kind of at least understood like some of the mindset and stuff coming back. So it was very helpful for me. But any way you cut it, it's just very difficult.
Well, I think it's difficult too because you're looking at something that doesn't turn on a dime. As you were saying, it
Yeah,
took you several years to decompress.
it did. It did. I still think about things. Just even just talking, get a little bit emotional, talking about some of those decisions. And it's wow, it's so different than where my life is right now with a wife and three children. Living in the suburbs here in Apex, North Carolina. It's just so different than being in a combat zone, getting shot at, and flying men and women off the battlefields, picking up body bags. It's how do you reconcile that in your brain? But over the years, it's just something just realize I played my part, was part of something special, and just saw some things that helped change who I am as a person. I think for the better, understanding how much more important and the value of life, you know,
Mhm.
over money is that's that's priceless. That's something that a lot of people don't have a good grasp on, unfortunately. So, just it's made me who I am, and I embrace that. And now I wrote a book, try to get that message out there. Other veterans, developing leadership for our youth, getting people to engage their communities and volunteer. Those things are critically important. That's what makes America special.
All the experiences you've been through have caused you to really stretch your comfort zone and
Yeah.
redefine it. W- What do you make of that? How has that influenced your life? Because I think once you get outside your comfort zone, there's an area of creativity, perhaps in your case, responsibility, ethos, It's an interesting place, and I think most of us prefer to stay in our comfort zone. What can you
Yes.
learn by getting out of it?
So, maybe it took those near death moments and seeing all those crazy things for me to realize that there's only one life. You only get one shot to get out there and make a difference. And when you carry those body bags, it's so heavy. It's so heavy physically and emotionally. Like those people gave up everything. You have an obligation now to get out there and make that difference so that their sacrifice mattered, you know? Um, what you do every single day. I mean, that's what when I wake up in the mornings, that's what I think about. That's what motivates me. And you only have one life, so you cannot be afraid to fail. All right. You know, there's so many people that have died, for this country. Like, what are you afraid of? You're afraid of failing? You're afraid of being made fun of? You write a book, nobody likes it, nobody cares. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm living, I'm breathing, I'm blessed with 3 children and an amazing wife. Like, failure will make you better. That fear of failure will motivate you, and failure makes you sharper. So if you're not pushing yourself towards failure, you haven't pushed yourself far enough. Like, you're not changing the world. You're not doing anything if you're not getting outside your comfort zone. If you're just sitting at home and you're watching TV, I mean, there's nothing wrong with those things, right? Spending that family time, but you know, your job or your profession or whatever it is you choose to do, in life, if you're not pushing yourself to the point where you've failed, then you're not pushing yourself hard enough and you have a lot more to give. So living in that little safety zone is not it's not going to help the world.
Most people totally fear failure. They fear not having the big, the name car and living in the right neighborhood and all these other extraneous things.
Yeah.
Our society is set up to be so materialistic.
It definitely, and I think I almost laugh now, the gentleman that offered me the $3.4 million bribe, that's a lot of money, and for most people, if that's all that they valued, they just would have taken the money and rolled out of there. And he was he was so pissed off when I wouldn't take the money. I wish I could have had a picture of his face too when I told him, because just that face of the so many times he had done that before and gotten away with it. He just found the one dude that would turn down $3.4 million. So that that was worth the price of admission for that one. It's still a lot of money, but man, I wish I could have pictured his face. That was fantastic.
Well, a lot of money and a lot of life lessons in that one. I mean,
Yeah.
no, my personal mantra on a daily basis is what can I learn? I think life presents us with many opportunities to learn.
Oh, I love to learn. Like every single day, I try to pick up something, whether I'm reading or picking up a new skill, trying a little bit of voice acting work. I just buying some equipment for that and just learning the sound engineering. Like, wow, I had absolutely no idea it was that difficult. I still have
Yeah.
absolutely no idea what I'm doing, but I just love learning new things.
I think it's fun actually to dive into new things. And
And
there's
it,
there's a continuity between these different things you choose because obviously you're building a base of skill to move into your new endeavor. But I think jumping in with both feet opens the door to so many adventures.
Absolutely, and getting working with kids and with students, it's prior to Duke University and worked with a lot of residents. The more youth that you work with, whether you're volunteering or it's your job, it makes you better because you're learning from them. You're teaching. As you teach, you kind of question like, well, why do I do it this way, or has it changed? Is there some new medical literature that supports something different? It makes you better. So the more you either volunteer or you work with youth, you're building leadership skills, you're building the future for our country. The more you get involved at that level, it will make you a better person.
Do you see yourself in some of your young residents?
Oh, yes. You forget. So every July, you've got these interns coming straight out of medical school that they're all bright individuals, but they just have no idea how it works in real life. Like the first time you see somebody die, the first time you run a code, some people just freeze. Like some people, they realize very quickly they just can't handle that type of pressure. But then you see the ones that can, and they're just, for them it's all academic. It hits them later, like the first time you run a pediatric code. I mean, you are laser focused and you're doing what you need to do. And then when you see mom and dad walk in the room, picking up their, dead child and crying their eyes out, boy, that hits you. And then you're still a human being. So there's so much growth and things that need to, you got to find your healthy coping mechanisms and things like that. Some people don't. That's where you see some physicians, they get addicted to drugs and alcohol, and we're no different than anybody else. Those are the ineffective coping mechanisms. But you see that energy and the excitement, and everything is new to them. You're like, oh man, I forgot what that was like, but then you see it on their face and you're teaching it. It really kind of helps bring you back from, the times where you see that mother ripping you out for, the 14-year-old with the ingrown toenail after the baby dies. I mean, that stuff jades you, but when you see the new generation of like physicians and leaders coming in, that kind of helps renew your faith in humanity.
Should we be teaching residents means of coping with what they see?
Absolutely, and they had started doing some of those things when I was in medical school. Um, I can't remember. It was ICE. It was ICE. I can't remember what it stood for, but it was tried to get into some of the touchy-feely humanity side of medicine. I'm sure they've come a long way now. I haven't been involved in those first or second year medical education, just doing the graduate medical education and residence. And you touch on those topics. There's probably not enough, but I mean, the more the better.
Yeah, touching on them in medical school, I don't know if it has any context. It's
Yeah,
not
and
until you're
until you've experienced that, or you've run
yeah,
that code and you've had to walk in and look that family straight in the eye and say, I'm sorry, they did not make it, they've died." And you just watch everybody collapse like, "Whoa, that's hard." That's by far the worst part of the job. But at the same time, when you can, I've worked in small rural towns. So when I go back to my hometown, Alliance, Nebraska, a very small town, and you're working with people that you've known your entire life, and everybody's cousins and aunts and uncles and their grandparents, and it's one of their parents that have come in, and you have to call like one of your old high school classmates on the phone, or you see them in person. I think it means more coming from me because they know me and they trust me and they know how far I've worked my tail off. I'm just always open and honest, and have done my best. And not everybody makes it. God's going to take them to a better place, and I do everything I can, but I can't save everybody.
that's an incredible emotional roller coaster, though, going from that laser focus of trying to save somebody to whatever the outcome is, good or bad.
Yes, and that takes several years to develop, and if you don't have a strong faith, everyone deals with that a different way, but for me, God has always put me in a position to help as many people as possible, and I know that I've studied harder than anybody out there. I've studied my tail off and worked extremely hard, but, God has other plans, and, sometimes he helps me save, and then sometimes it's just not enough, and there are other plans in order there. I don't always understand that, but this is a job where you can't be 100% successful all the time.